a merging of action and awareness like that. That is something you experience when you're in flow state. And I was like, man, that's cool. Like that is kind of like exactly what combat sports training, jiu-jitsu, MMA fighting is. It's like the awareness, like you have to be present. It forces you very much to be in the moment. But the other side of that is the action. We're fortunate if we can sneak off and get those still real quiet moments for a little while. But in reality, we all have a lot of responsibilities. We all have a lot of stuff to do. So it has to be merged with that action. So kind of like the heart of that is, you know, trying to be mindful and present throughout our actions and what we're doing.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Built for Legacy. I'm your host, Chris Nichols. Today, our guest is Noah Oliver, who is a former Navy EOD turned entrepreneur, founder of Flowhold, which is an MMA and Jiu-Jitsu apparel and training gear business. This podcast had two themes that really stuck out to me. One was the concept of flow state, which is where the name Flowhold originated from. We talk about Noah's perspective on what flow state is, this idea of mental harmony and passion while you're being challenged doing something difficult. The other theme was Noah's gratitude practice. One of the biggest issues I've personally struggled with, and that I've seen a lot of high performers and entrepreneurs struggle with as well, is the reliance of the external scoreboard in your life to dictate whether you're going to be happy or not. I really wanted to dig into this topic with Noah to see what specifically he has done to get to a point of finding internal peace and happiness before the business even became successful. I've seen this theme brought up so many times in my past podcasts with guests of how you need to be at a place of inner peace and gratitude in order for that external success to then follow. We talk about Noah's story, his experience in the Navy, his transition out of the military to getting his MBA, experimenting with a few business ventures early on in the career, to then starting Flowhold, which actually started off as a sock company and is now a successful apparel brand in the jiu-jitsu and MMA community. We talk about the lifestyle and feeling that Noah wants to portray through his brand Flowhold, lessons he's learned around product innovation, and the balance he strives for in his life as an entrepreneur between his family, his business, and his training. This is such a great conversation around gratitude and mindset and creating a brand that impacts the emotion and feeling of the consumer. Thank you all for supporting the podcast. Please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and follow the Instagram page Built for Legacy Podcast and at Nichols and Dimes for clips and updates. Now, please enjoy this episode with Noah Oliver. Noah, what's going on?
Howdy, sir. Happy to be here.
Dude, thanks for being on the show and coming on over.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for being patient with all the technical fun that we have running a podcast.
Yeah. Like we discussed, I am very, very used to things not going as planned and adapting as we go. So it's no sweat, bud.
Yeah. So you're getting your hands in some content work, aren't you? With Flowhold.
That's the plan. Kind of starting to dip in a little bit now, but just moved into a new space and kind of have a good spot and sort of setting it up to do some similar stuff as this, and just as a marketing tool to, kind of maybe get some more content out there for Flowhold, but largely a selfish endeavor as well. Kind of, we spoke a little bit before, but
for sure,
just having people that I'm either already good friends with and want an excuse to sit down for an extended period of time, like as this point in life and things get busy with the business and family particularly, and then trying to, train and everything else. It's like, maybe it's a little sad that you kind of have to have an excuse like this to, we need to create content value in order to just sit down and have a good talk with our friends. But true. It's kind of like able to, I guess, get two birds stoned at once in a sense.
For sure.
So, so kind of, it's just like, I've got this, I got the brand and got a decent audience from it. And through that, I've been able to connect with so many interesting, cool people. And I'm sure you've experienced through this show. So I'm like, man, I should take advantage of that and, be able to get some good conversations in. So.
Well, I love it. I recommend it to anyone. That's the reason why I started it and what keeps me going with it. The best part about doing these things is this right now, sitting down and actually connecting with the person. It can get a little stressful with all the technical stuff, media stuff. And I'm at a point, I still produce everything myself, even almost 100 episodes in, but it's all worth it when I sit down and make these connections. And I've created amazing friendships with many of the guests because I'm truly interested in being around these people and learning from them
Right.
and what they're up to. And that's where it comes from. And if you have that approach in whatever content you make, I think that authenticity will come through, and your customers, your potential customers, are going to see that and like you more and want to be a part of it. And I think, like, Andy Frisella with First Form, he's a great example of this because I listened to his podcast and I didn't know much about the brand before I got to know him. But because I got to know him and I liked him, I started buying their stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's the idea. And like Flowhold is very much, me and my influences through my youth and, as a brand, and it all started to be able to have an excuse to spend more time entrenched in the jiu-jitsu and MMA world. Fortunately that has worked out to this point. There was years there where I wasn't so sure about that. Maybe we'll get into it, I don't know. But yeah, it's just it's really rad to be able to connect with people that have such similar passions and aligned, thinking on a lot of things. So
absolutely. I want to start with that. The idea of Flowhold, the logo, the brand, the name. I've heard you talk in another podcast about this coming from a sense of flow state, which I think is so cool. And anyone who does jiu-jitsu, I think, should understand this, or anyone who's been doing it for some time, that you can enter that flow state. And this applies way beyond jiu-jitsu, anything you're doing. And I'm curious, how did that idea come about for you? And what does that mean to you personally?
That is, to me, I don't know, it's hard to nail down, like, to say that is the biggest benefit of training or of combat sports training. But it's certainly up there as one of them. And maybe the biggest might be the community and the friendships, but also like that, to be able to so quickly tap into that flow state. And, if people aren't, I think at this point it's a commonly used term and most people are kind of familiar with it, but it's really just about being, present and fully involved and in the activity that's going on, and so like we use that tagline, emerging of action and awareness. And so that's actually like, I was reading this book on flow state. I think it's called Stealing Fire. It was like, it listed kind of all of these things that were like, these are ways you can, these are elements of being within a flow state, I guess. And that was like one of them. And it like sounded really cool to me. Emerging of action and awareness, like that is something you experience when you're in flow state. And I was like, man, that's cool. Like that is kind of like exactly what combat sports training, jiu-jitsu, MMA fighting is. It's like the awareness, like you have to be present. It forces you very much to be in the moment. But the other side of that is the action. And so it's like, there is beauty to just like, still, you see the monk on the hillside, it's still and it's quiet. And, I think having those moments are important and very valuable, but life is not that way. We're fortunate if we can sneak off and get those still real quiet moments for a little while. But in reality, we all have a lot of responsibilities. We all have a lot of stuff to do. So it has to be merged with that action. So kind of like the heart of that is, trying to be mindful and present throughout our actions and what we're doing. And, I think there's really no better way than through combat sports training. And like you said, there's a lot of avenues. We were talking about like paddleboarding and surfing earlier. I think action sports in general are other like really great ways to tap into that. But even, playing an instrument, painting, a lot of art, a lot of, just creating, all that stuff kind of pulls you into that presence. But there is a very particular type of presence that you have to be in when someone is attempting to choke you unconscious or knock you out. That is like, it kind of takes it to another level. So I think, for me, that is one of the best benefits of training overall is being forced into that mindful awareness, and then trying to take that and apply it into other areas of life as well.
Yeah. So And there's another aspect to it because there is a submission in jiu-jitsu called a toe hold.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So tell me about how that incorporates into it.
Yeah. So it was a little like kind of like a play on words. Flowhold, the brand itself, like I've talked about this before, but essentially like I didn't have the confidence to start out and say, I'm going to start a training gear company overall. I honestly, I feel like, in hindsight, like I just was a little more small-minded back then. So I felt like I really needed like a really particular, like small niche that I could like sneak my way into, in a sense, where it was like, I didn't have the confidence to go out and be like, I'm going to make cool gear that everyone wants, people are going to wear my logo big across their chest. And it's like, well, why are they going to, you think you can make something cool enough that all these people want to wear? And I'm like, maybe not.
Yeah.
So I really, it started as socks. Like it was just socks. So that's kind of why like the logo is what it is and why it's like specifically what it is, the toe hold with a sock on it. Yeah. And, and it kind of moved and evolved into a bigger, like overall training gear brand. I mean, I love that logo. And I think putting the sock on there is a good move because like, I guess a logo with like a dude's foot on it, or like a little bunch of little piggy toesies is a little weird, so it's almost
Some
like,
people like
it's
it
almost
bit,
like, yeah. Something we might have been a bigger hit with a certain audience, but maybe not the one we're trying to hit. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of cool having the sock on there, and it still works really well. And it's kind of an homage to where it started. That's a lot of people definitely don't realize until, I talk about it on something like this, but so it started like specifically within that niche, and it was really just like a very much a side kind of thing. And I didn't have like, I definitely didn't start. I mean, I didn't start even thinking that was going to be, a training gear brand. I mean, I was just like, I'm going to do these socks, and I made we created the brand and the logo out of it. And a really good friend of mine, like one of my best buddies, Alban, he's a graphic designer. He helped me do the initial branding and the logo. And then it evolved from there. So it wasn't like I wasn't like, I'm going to create this brand and it's going to be my full-time gig. And, I got out of the military. I was using my GI Bill to go back to school. And I was like, essentially I went to, I just did my master's in business because I kind of knew I was interested in some sort of, I wanted to be in business of some sort, but I didn't even know specifically if I was going to be able to. I definitely had like an entrepreneurial itch, but I didn't have the confidence necessarily to say like, I'm going to go all in on this. So I was very open to like working in some marketing company or, I didn't know what I was going to do at that time. So it was just like, well, I'm going to start a couple things on the side. And I'd done some products online through Amazon at that point already. And so I was just really like, I was trying out a bunch of stuff. I did a couple other things after kind of Flowhold had started when it was still very much in its infancy. And I was just like throwing things out there to see what stuck and what would potentially work. I mean, I was like, and again, I going into business school and using the GI Bill was like, all right, the government will give me a stipend while I go to school. And it was really for me like an opportunity for a couple of years to have like some money coming in so I could kind of figure out what my next move was going to be. I was very uncertain. I was glad that I did my time in the military, but I knew that wasn't what I wanted for a career any longer. But I didn't know exactly what, I was going to do.
Yeah. So everything you just said is getting into a big theme of this podcast outside of the entrepreneurship focus, but it's around this transition that a lot of elite athletes or veterans make into whatever's next, right? In this case, entrepreneurship. And I'm really curious about what was going through your mind around what your life was going to look like after the Navy, because you went to Florida State, right? Yeah. You're from Florida, and then you came, the Navy brought you to San Diego. Yep. You're in EOD for 6 years or so.
Correct.
And when you were in that, you kind of started talking about it, but what really was going through your head about what am I doing after this and how long do I want to stay in the Navy?
Yeah. I mean, the Navy was largely, the one through line in my life that's definitely been consistent was that like, I knew I didn't want to work a desk job. I didn't want like a 9-to-5 classic kind of position. And I want to caveat that by saying too, that was my personal position. I grew up with it. My dad was a pastor. My mom was like a a school teacher, sometimes part-time, sometimes full-time. She was very involved. So like my dad could, and when I say pastor, I'm talking about like a really small church. And so like my dad would chaperone the field trips. My mom would come pick me up. They, you know, they were around. They were like, they weren't entrenched in a schedule that someone else was making for them. So I think, you know, and I've kind of looked back and connected some dots there. And I think largely that was ingrained in me from a certain age. Also then like, getting into skateboarding and punk rock music and stuff, like then it became even more of like almost like anti-establishment might be a strong way to put it, but it just like, it made me think about the concept of like, okay, you don't exactly have to do like a typical path, you know?
Right.
And like we were talking about earlier, you know, my wife works a corporate job and I think I strongly believe that like that is a good path for a lot of people. I think there's like a strong romanticization of entrepreneurship and like if you want to be successful in your life, like, you know, don't be a bitch, don't ever have a boss tell you what to do. Like that's not true at all. There's so many benefits to working you know, a regular steady job, and it really depends on your personality and your lifestyle and like what you want. So I do feel like sometimes people kind of over glamorize this like entrepreneurship. And if you're of a certain personality and have a certain mindset, then like it's, for me personally, I know, and I feel like this was the right move, but I just want to like kind of almost put that disclaimer out that like, and probably if you're listening to podcasts like this, you're interested in that. So more likely most of your audience will be inclined towards that route. But certainly it's not for everyone. But yeah, I knew that I kind of just wanted to create a lifestyle for myself that I could be more in control of. I really have always enjoyed like my hobbies and like you know, and it's like you train a lot of jiu-jitsu, and I think anyone that kind of gets the bug knows like they want to, when you start training jiu-jitsu, like you want to train jiu-jitsu. Yeah. And so, you know, the military was great at times. You know, the military is like real, there's periods where you're like super busy, there's a lot going on. And then there's periods where it's real chill and you're going in for a couple hours. So there was times where I got to train a lot of jiu-jitsu, and then there was times where like I wasn't able to. But I knew as I was kind of like getting to that phase of figuring out what the next part of my life was going to be, that I wanted to be something that I had more control over my time. And the military definitely like, put the seal on that for me. That was, you know, during those times when I didn't have a lot of control, it just made me realize that I didn't want like a dozen different people to have the ability to tell me what to do, which was, you know, what the case was for a long time. Yeah. So
that really got on your, what would you say it got on your skin when you're in the Navy? Because I mean, that is what the military is. You are following orders and is very obedient.
Yeah. And I didn't love the like, I would say it got under my skin. I definitely like, it's something that I have tried to work on. I definitely don't like people telling me what to do. I found like arbitrary rules that don't make a lot of sense really bother me. You know, things are important. Like we've got to have like we live in a structured society for a reason. There's rules, they make sense, but like, you know, there's a lot of stuff, especially in the military, just like doesn't make sense and it's dumb. So that kind of stuff would bother me. I didn't like the hierarchy. I didn't like being perceived as my rank, as my value. Yeah. You know, and you know, I guess you see that sometimes even on the jiu-jitsu mats, where I think, you know, it's important to look beyond someone's perceived position within that organization or that activity and understand like, hey, there's a lot to people, you know, and everyone has value in very different ways, you know, and so a lot of times in the military, like, you know, and in special operations too, a lot of guys like they have their degrees already and they go enlisted, you know, like myself, and not that degrees really even matter all that much, but like in the military it does, you know, and it kind of was like the assumption that if you are an officer, you have a degree. If you're enlisted, like you don't. And, you know, there's a ton of guys that I have friends that had already had their masters and they enlisted and stuff like that. So I hated like the rank structure and all that, but yeah, particularly, I just did not enjoy all those people with all the control in my life. And on the flip side of that is that like when you do go the entrepreneurial route and no one has control over what they can tell you to do, it is all on you. And so there's no one to fall back on either. So it's like there's two sides to every coin, but I would prefer the latter, you know?
Yeah. I can totally relate to all of that.
Yeah.
That was a big reason why I didn't have interest in going the military route when I was a young kid. So I was born in Coronado. And I had a lot of Navy family.
Yeah.
And we moved to Hawaii when I was very young. And it wasn't because of military, it was my dad's job separately, but a lot of people assume it is, right? Because it's a natural move. And, you know, I whenever I go to Coronado, it's like I'm kind of known as a part of this family. And then this is, you know, certain reputations of people in the family. But I just knew I was kind of an out there kid, and when I was young, and I knew that I knew the military as something that was just a very structured, obedient type of job that was just not at all representative of me when I was young. And so I think that's why I didn't have that interest, and that, you know, I've always loved the military and love all my friends and my family who've been in it and respect it super highly, but like it's the same thing that you basically had going through you when you were in the Navy. And I guess like, yeah, entrepreneurship is kind of the natural rebellious type of path to take, right? So what were some of the projects you started to work on from an entrepreneurial standpoint then while you were still in the Navy, or at least getting out, perhaps maybe when you were getting your MBA?
Yeah, that was, no, what you said, like the rebellious streak. There's this, you know, Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia. He says, if you want to understand the entrepreneur, study the juvenile delinquent. So it's kind of, you know, funny. I think you see that kind of little bit of a rebellious streak, at least through most entrepreneurs of some sort. But I did start like my first. It was as I was getting out of the military. So I had, you know, again, it was like school was going to be kind of a way to, you know, of course there's the value of education, and it was really cool. I just dicked around so much through I knew I was going to go into the military when I was, so I got out of high school and went to Florida State, and I'd gotten, you know, there was they have a state scholarship where if you have a decent GPA and SAT, like they'll pay for your school tuition. So it was like I had undergrad paid for, so it made perfect sense to go and get my bachelor's and then go into the military, because why not? It was already paid for. So, but I kind of knew I was going to go in the military, so I wasn't really taking school all that seriously through my undergrad. So, by this point, you know, my 6 years in the military, I'd kind of at some point along the way, like started to kind of understand the value of like self-education, you know, and I started to get really interested in learning and reading about things that interested me, and like just trying to acquire knowledge, you know.
That's a huge point.
Yeah. And so I really was excited for that opportunity to go back to school and actually have that mindset of like really wanting to learn and take a lot away from that experience. So
more intentionally.
Yeah. So I say, you know, that grad school was an opportunity for me to kind of like have a couple years where I could get paid, get a stipend and figure some things out. And it was, but I did learn a lot there, and I enjoyed that side of it and that experience. But yeah, when I was kind of as I was getting out, I knew I was going to go into grad school, but then again, I was like, all right, I only got a couple years. I need to like start figuring some stuff out. So I was like kind of throwing some stuff at the wall, figuring some things out. And I started to learn about like Amazon, selling and FBA, fulfilled by Amazon. And you know what, I think I read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek, and I got like pretty enthralled at that idea, because I'm like, all right, I'm getting out of the military. I was just like, again, burnt out on authority. I'm like, man, it'd be sick. I'm like, I want to spend all my time just like training jiu-jitsu and surfing and like working out. Yeah. And, you know, I didn't really have a concept of a career that I could find like really fulfilling at that time, I guess. And what I did find fulfillment in, outside of like relationships was training and surfing and, just doing physical stuff, I guess. So I was like, man, I really want to spend more time doing that. Maybe it'd be cool if I could figure out a way to like make money and then have more free time to do that kind of stuff. That was the idea. So, off of that, got into the Amazon FBA thing. I did like a surf poncho, like changing towel was like the initial product that I did. And it was, it was probably like my last like 3 months in the military as I was getting ready to transition out. I think I started learning about all that stuff. And then did like that first product, and it did decently well. And there was a lot of learning from that. The thing with all that Amazon stuff, and especially like a non-differentiated product that doesn't have a strong brand behind it, and particularly on Amazon, is like, it really just becomes like a commodity race to the bottom for pricing. So if you don't build a brand around something that means something that either people can identify with or they recognize it for the value of the product or whatever it may be, you really don't have a lot to stand on outside of just like what you can initially put in front of their face and the price that you can offer it at. And the nature of Amazon is most of the time people are kind of going there to find a good deal on stuff, a solid enough product that's like a decent deal. So there wasn't really like a longevity in that, at least from the way that I approached that initial product. But it was a really good way to get my feet wet into the e-commerce space and start to learn some things. So I started doing that.
Can I ask, what do you think was the biggest thing you learned from that first experience? And this, I can relate to this because I did something last year where I started a business without the intention of trying to make this the next big thing. I just said, hey, I want to try this. I want to see what I can learn from actually doing these things. Yeah. Right. And I'm curious if there's one thing that really stuck out from this experience.
I'd say like on a more practical level, something I'd learned and earlier on, especially, was just like, I would say like, it was kind of like it felt like I needed to I gotta get something going, and I only got this amount of time. So like kind of learning, at least now, to not feel like in too much of a rush to get a product out before like it's exactly what I want. Now I really have learned, a lot of this stuff, like I have many iterations, and sometimes a product is released like over a year after its like kind of initial conception in a way, because there's been many iterations, and sometimes I'll just shelf stuff and be like, this idea is there, but like it doesn't feel right yet. And I'll just let it sit for a minute. And then sometimes something will pop in my head like 4 months later, 6 months later, and be like, oh, like that's the tweak. And then you mess around with it, mock it up, or get another sample made, and you're like, that's the way. Where early stages, it felt like I'm like, I really got to get something going here. Like, let me bump some stuff out. Right. So like, specifically with those surf ponchos, like the fabric wasn't that great. There was like a feel to it that I didn't particularly love. And, there was good customer feedback on it, but every now and again people would comment on that, and I was like, whatever. It also wasn't a strong brand behind it, so it didn't really like necessarily, the reputation of that product didn't matter all that much. You're just trying to climb up the ranking page on Amazon and have good product ratings. So very different like philosophies behind putting a product out there than what I have now. And then in that kind of same vein, I would say like what my initial approach was, like that 4-hour work week, which I still think there's a lot of value in some of those concepts and everything. But like I said, I didn't really understand or could conceive of a fulfilling career path. So it was like, I just want to set it and forget it and kind of be able to make money. And then as like Flowhold started to develop, and that was kind of even like the first, I pivoted. I did some Amazon sales with Flowhold with like our initial like shorts and rash guards, and that was cool. But then I started like really finding a lot of fulfillment in the brand building and like creating something that was a lot bigger, that was definitely not going to be set and forget. But I was like, man, the time that I'm investing into building this thing is actually, I'm enjoying more, I think, than if I just did have that free time to continue to like, because you can only train and surf so many hours of the day. Right. And, and your priorities change as you grow older and the family starts and all that stuff. So it's like, I spend a lot of time working now, but I've tried to structure things in a way where the work is very enjoyable and it's very fulfilling. And yeah, it's hard at times, but just like, you know, jiu-jitsu, it's like, just because something's hard, you know, and if, in fact, almost most of the things that are going to be the most enjoyable are going to be the most challenging and the hardest things. Right. So, you know, that's where a lot of my philosophy on business and life have like evolved a little bit of like being like, okay, I don't want to just like have something easy that, I mean, great. You know, that's also great too. I mean, if someone were like, if I could snap my fingers and then have an extra, you know, 5-10K just flowing in every month, then yeah, of course, great. But most of the time, those things don't really pan out that way anyhow. And you're going to have to spend time like maintaining and doing all that stuff. So if you're going to have to spend time on it, like why not invest that time into something that like you'll be really proud of and fulfilled by?
Sure.
Yeah.
So you talked about the fun and the brand building. That's a big piece I like to talk about. It's so interesting because you're right. It's way more than just, I mean, you're creating a feeling, an emotion for people to relate to, and that impacts them deeply. And, you know, before we get into that, particularly with Flowhold, I want to just get the timeline right with the Amazon business you were doing with the Poncho moving. When did Flowhold start after that? How did you initially come up with the idea to say, hey, I want to do something that's meant for the jiu-jitsu community or whatever it was going through your head with these socks?
Yeah. So I got out of the military in February of May of 2018. So the Amazon business had kind of started at that point. And then, I started school that year in August. And then in, December of 2018 was when I kind of launched the first like Flowhold products. And then kind of like with, you know, it was a couple pairs of socks that we had done, and then just like the core like brand logo t-shirts on a couple different colors. And you know, the socks did whatever, but like people liked the shirts and the brand felt, and the brand is like it's like a little baby in a sense, you know, and in the beginning, like, and especially, you know, now I'm a father, I have 2 kids and I have a third on the way. And so I think a lot through these lines of fatherhood and children and growing stuff. But, you know, you're it's cool watching your kids like personality develop. And I think like pretty much anyone will tell you, and I would imagine even, you know, there's very, very few brands out there that, you know, they have the idea of what it is at conception. And then, you know, 5-10 years later, that it's the same thing. I think most brands like develop and grow a lot. And then it starts to almost like grow this identity outside of you in a sense. You know, it's very, like I said before, it is very much me, but it's like in the same way your child is, but then they have their own thing too, you know? So it's like, the customer and the community that's like built around the brand also has a lot of influence on it and what it becomes, you know, not that you like are relying on other people to tell you what to do in a sense, but like they're an integral part of it, and it just like kind of naturally develops that way. But the brand, it started then, and then the t-shirts did well. People liked like the logo, I guess. And I was like, okay, then it kind of gave me like a little bit of confidence to be like, okay, let's branch out into some other like natural jiu-jitsu stuff. And then, so I kind of saw at the time, like a whole, and I'd had the Amazon experience. And at the time on Amazon, there weren't like shorts, like board short style, really like grappling shorts. So I was like, oh, like, that seems like a good hole in the market that I could fill. So I created some of those, put them on Amazon, and those started to do well. And then rash guards. And then I was like, all right, let me mess around with some designs and stuff. And then just started to like develop from there. But that was all like a really, really slow process. You know, this is like years ago now, but like there was a long period of time where Flowhold was like, it was several years before it even became kind of like, oh, this potentially even could be my main long-term thing. You know, it was like, oh, just iffy. And there was even a period there where it like felt like I was like, I don't think this is gonna happen. You know, it was like sort of like as school was ending, you know, and I think everyone when they start any like long-term endeavor, business endeavor, creative endeavor, like most of the time you underestimate the amount of like work and effort and time that it's going to take for someone to be successful.
Yeah.
You know, some people may get lucky at something, and that's probably a disservice to them, especially if it's earlier on, because then you have a false sense of how these things typically go. So every now and again, someone might get lucky, but I don't think that recreates, you know, often. So, you know, I'm thankful that it has gone the slow, steady growth route. And I'm thankful for those years in the beginning where it was like really challenging. And there were some really like not encouraging moments for me where I was like, dude, I just don't, I don't know. I was so confused and so uncertain, and Flowhold definitely did not seem like the thing that was going to be what allowed me to have a fulfilling, like successful career. And so then I was like, man, I've done, you know, I'm like almost 30 now. I spent 6 years in the military, and then that didn't turn out to be the thing that I was going to do. And then now I've been messing around with this Flowhold stuff, and I was working these other like little jobs here and there and trying to figure out and trying to maybe build some skills and like, but like what like can I do, you know, that's going to be enjoyable and like be able to, you know, provide for my family, since, you know, and at that time I didn't have kids. So that was like a little bit less of a stress, but, you know, I mean, it's just like
But you still felt it. It's all relative. You didn't know what it was like to have kids at that point.
Yeah. I mean, I knew I wanted to start a family, so I was like, I got to figure something out like sooner than later. But, and even when my son was born, like it was still before, you know, I kind of like have told people before, but it felt like, you know, even as so at the point when Flowhold started to show some potential, and this was around the time when I was like, all right, I feel like if I can take some, because I was doing like a few other gigs, like kind of like contractor type, like consulting kind of thing here. I was teaching some fitness class, you know, I was just doing all sorts. I was renting like we did a camper van where we were renting that. We were just doing all sorts of things, just getting money from here, just to try to make stuff work, and then still try to like put some effort into Flowhold. And then as it kind of was gaining more traction, I was like, all right, you know, I think if I can give some more time and energy to this thing, that I could see the potential now, at least, you know, so it had gotten to that point. And then I kind of, you know, I made the leap where I like, I stopped a couple of those other side gigs and I put all that time in a Flowhold. And then for like, you know, probably a year after that, it was like, it felt like treading water, and it just felt like there was no, and maybe every now and again, you're like, your little toe would touch some sort of beam and you could kind of catch a break, but then that would disappear. And you're just like, it's just like constantly moving and trying to stay afloat in a sense. And it's a little, it's tiring, and you can't fully catch your breath, and there's no rest, and, you know, but, then at a point, it just, with a few, maybe months in a row now of like, and then you have your first good month or a good drop or whatever it may be, but you're like, well, that was good, but like, I don't know if I can do that again. It can't recreate, like, and so you don't want to get complacent. And then, so after a few solid months in a row, like finally got to the point where it was like, oh, like there's like a table under me now, and I can like the water's still on my neck, but like, man, I can shake my arms out.
Yeah.
And like, you know, that feeling was really good. But, you know, I had my son initially when I was still in that like treading water phase. So, like, you know,
wow.
But yeah, so I mean, you know, I guess I say all that to get to the idea of like that this was like a constant progression for me, you know, and it's really just a matter of just at least, you know, now I'm at a point where I have like a lot of self-belief and a lot of hope and a really strong vision. But it didn't start out that way. And that was the same way the company was like a gradual process of building into something fruitful. Like a lot of my, internal ideas were a gradual process as well. And I don't think that's much of a coincidence, you know? And I was talking to a buddy who's a very successful business guy, and and a really good friend of mine, he was like, he's been interested in Flowhold since day one. And he's been very, he's believed in it a lot too. And he was like asking about it. I'm like, man, this is around that time. I'm like, man, it's finally going good. And like, and he was just asking about like my, just like how things were going. Anyway, I'm like, dude, I'm just like, I'm in this spot where I'm just like, I'm feeling so grateful, I'm just like, so, and he's like, yeah, man, he's like, yeah, cause the business is doing well. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I'm like, dude, I'm feeling grateful, and then the business is doing well.
Oh, cool.
You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
So like that was kind of stuff that for me, and I'm glad it happened that way, because again, thankful for the early struggle. Like if things had I got lucky on somewhere and it started to do well, I don't think like it would have forced my perspective shift, and then I could have just kept things going the way they did,
Yeah.
So yeah, I got to this point where I realized like, I'm like, dude, I'm not fucking waiting for all this stuff to be great before I like feel good, or before I give myself permission to be like grateful and present and happy, I'm like, well, like, cause that goalpost will continue to move, and it's, your goals and everything, they're going to continue to move, and that's good. You want to, like, as you achieve something, you want to have the next thing to strive for, but you also want to be like, have a sense of fulfillment along with that, and so I kind of got to this place where, I'd heard this message so many times, but I sort of finally got to a place where I could start to embody it a little bit. I was like, even though things aren't where I want them to be, like, let me be grateful for what I've gotten to from this point, and I feel like shifting into that mindset, it's like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at that point. Like, I got grateful, and then I got more things to be grateful for.
Right. I'm so glad you circled to that point, because it's something that I personally struggle with, that a lot of people struggle with. And it's a topic that's come up a lot on my podcast with guests, is finding that sense of truth within yourself first, and then the business external success will follow, instead of being reliant on the scoreboard externally, or what you think others think of you, what you think your perception is from others. And I'm curious, I just want to be more tactical about, how did you get to that point? Because this is a very honest question for me too. Yeah. Like, I'm struggling with this. I if I don't like how things are, then it's going to affect other things. Right. And I think a lot of people can relate, who really care about high performance and success in their lives. Right. So what do you think it was? What actions did you take? You can be specific.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like, there's nothing groundbreaking. I mean, it's focusing on noticing the things to be grateful for realistically. I mean, it's like there's corny sayings, and there's all sorts of stuff through like personal development space and self-help or whatever. But I mean, the thing is, like, I almost like, I used to have a mentality, I think, that was like too cool for school in a sense. And I think like being grateful, like a lot of times, and some people get real over the top and corny with it. And there's, it's fun to prod and talk shit and make fun and in the combat sports in the military and like the punk, like all that, like, it's a lot cooler to be like nihilistic and like, that's lame, like this sucks. And like, that was the culture that I came up in a lot too. But like, ultimately, like, when you go about life with those attitudes, like what are the fruits of those attitudes? It's like, it's not usually great. So I kind of had to like, first thing I started to do was like really become aware of what like my natural thought processes were like, and like my internal diet. Like, I remember one day, as I was kind of starting to like absorb the concept of like, all right, what is your self-talk? And this is stuff that comes along like as with kids a lot too, because then you really start to like, you start to understand that like, we all have, we have our subconscious, we have these internal dialogues that are running. It's almost like a software program within our computer. Right. And so with kids, like, they're not really developing their own thought processes yet. Right. So it's essentially, as a parent, like, you are programming that child. Right. And then that's what, like, you know, a lot of people, that's why you see all, like, you know, as they go to therapy and you're unpacking all this stuff that your parents did. Well, fortunately, like, I had great parents, you know, I don't have like some traumatic childhood to get over, but, you know, everybody has their shit, you know, life's hard, things happen, and, you know, you got stuff you got to go through. So I started understanding of like being like really aware of how I wanted to like talk to my kids and like the ideas that I wanted to intentionally try to ingrain in them, you know, and like that, you know, and this was through like reading books and listening to podcasts and all sorts of, Carolyn Dweck, Growth Mindset is an awesome book. And that I really thought within her framework a lot of how, I wanted to raise my kids, of like empowering, you know, she talks about like, it's ideas you hear often, but, you know, it's like telling your kid, like not saying, oh, good job, you did so well on that test, you're so smart, you know, versus you want to say something like, good job on that test, you studied so hard and you got that grade, you know? So like ingraining in them that like the self-efficacy and the it's the things that they do, not like naturally who they are, you know, that are the reasons to that, how they do well. So, you know, I was just thinking about all this stuff, how I want to talk to my kids, and like the idea that like the words we say matter. And then it kind of like at a point I started to flip that on myself and be like, okay, well, now you're putting a lot of thought into how you're talking to your kids because you want to like essentially program their subconscious in a way that's going to serve them really well.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
and yourself ultimately, that's where this is all going.
That's where this goes.
Yeah.
But then I was like, but what are you saying to yourself? And I remember very specifically, like being in the kitchen one day and, you know, I'd forgotten to do something or whatever. And I was like, man, you fucking idiot. Like you always do this. And I'm like I stopped myself like mid-sentence and be like, dude, how many times do like I sit there and talk to myself in this way? And would I ever in a million years say something like that to my son? I would never, ever degrade my child that way, you know? And I would never, it's just like, it's inconceivable, but like, and then everyone I think does this. Like we talk to ourselves in ways that we would never, ever speak to our loved ones, you know? Or especially a child who we're trying to like grow and develop, but like we are trying to grow and develop ourselves as well.
That's such a great one. That's something anyone can take into practice right now.
Yeah.
Just think about it. Would this be something I say to a loved one or my child?
Yeah. And look, and you know, again, combat sports, military, like tough love, getting after it. Like I'm not talking about like, you know, really like lovey-dovey, everything's good, you're doing fine. Like, no, I've got a lot of stuff I want to work on and stuff, but like, how is a good coach going to motivate their players to do well? You know, are they going to sit there and degrade them and talk shit and like, you guys fucking suck, you're the worst? Like maybe that'll get short-term results, but it's not a good way for like to have long-lasting results, you know? So I started really thinking about my internal dialogue and like how I talk to myself and like what the things are. And then to be able to do that, I think, you know, like mindfulness meditation was a good practice for that, was to be able to like start to be aware of the chatter and the internal dialogue that goes on. You have to try to at least, you know, become the observer of a type. And, you know, that for me, I have like a really speedy mind. My brain's all over the place. Like it's not an easy thing, but, you know, I used to look at it from a perspective of being like, man, like, dude, I can't meditate. This stuff sucks. I even, you know, every time, like every few seconds, like I'm switching. And then somewhere I heard it like kind of reframed as like those essentially are the reps. Like it's the same thing as the gym. Like it's like a good meditation session isn't when you sit down and you have cleared your mind and you have no thoughts and you're fully present the whole time. A good meditation time is like, oh, you got 100 reps in. Like that's 100 bicep curls. That's strengthening that muscle of being like, okay, my mind's going towards this thought. I'm going to pull it back and either bring it to nothing or, you know, in a sense of a day-to-day life, I'm going to pull it back and bring it, it's going in a negative direction. I can now see that it's going there, stop it before it gets too far and start to pull it back the other way. You know, so that was a big thing for me, was kind of being present and aware of thoughts. And then the other big thing was, again, like gratitude and just trying to be aware of it and noticing it in the smallest cases. And when it pops up, it's that idea of like, you're car shopping and you're like, I'm going to get a Tacoma. And then you drive down the road that day and you've been thinking about Tacomas and you're like, oh, there's a great Tacoma. Dude, there's Tacomas everywhere, especially San Diego. There literally are Tacomas everywhere. But, you know, it's like, if you are like looking for something, like you will find it. So I started, and this is all the oldest wisdom is going to tell you to do this. Like, count your blessings, be aware of your gratitudes, and try to notice these things. Yeah. So I started, simple journaling practice. And, someone mentioned that, when you're doing these things, you should, it's a good idea to like, not just look for like these awesome moments throughout your day, but to like really even like look at, the simplest of things, and be like, I got 2 working legs. Like I can take a moment and be grateful for that.
Yeah.
And then, having some perspective is good too. The military is tough. Training combat sports is tough. You come across hard things. And like, if you're like from a jiu-jitsu or a training perspective, it's like, I'm grateful that I don't have this 260-pound man compressing my chest right now and I can breathe. It's like to have some sort of like experience with hard things is good, because you can be a lot more grateful when you're not in those states or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I started, just journaling gratitudes, and then I became more aware, and it really does become like you're going through your day and you're like something happens, you're like, oh, that's a good one. And then you're like, wait, I'm noticing things. And then that evolved into like too, like my wife and I just started like sharing ours, and it's kind of almost like, it sounds like a corny practice of sorts, but in reality, like, and that's another thing too about like being the too cool for school and whatever. It's like, dude, I really don't give a shit anymore about like how things are perceived or if they look cool or not. What matters to me is like the efficacy, and if it works and if it creates good things for my life. So whatever. My wife and I started like saying at the end of the day, like, wait, what were you grateful for? And then it becomes a cool way for us to connect. And then it's like, honestly, like I don't love journaling. Like it's a practice I'm trying to like improve upon. But I won't sit there for like really long times and really go in, but it's a cool way. Then when I'm talking to my wife about it, we're just having a conversation, and now I can really like expound on some of these things. And a lot of times it'll be about, with our kids, or, oh man, Teddy did this today. And he said the sweetest thing, and we get to connect and tell our stories. And, so it just kind of became like another cool way for us to sort of like connect through that. And then now, and now, I mean, I do it now it's like, not just like 3 things. I just like, I try to, every morning I sit down and I start my day by thinking about, things I'm grateful for. And then maybe I'll share them with my wife later that day too, or maybe more things, but like just starting to notice, man.
Well, dude, that's a great answer. I mean, that gratitude practice, it is so core to all of this stuff. And the reason why I asked it earlier, I described around how vital it is to see that success externally. It's going to start with something like this. And I think a lot of people hear, oh, be thankful, have gratitude, and they struggle to figure out a process to do that. And you just laid out how you did it. And just from what I gathered from basically to conclude to summarize your steps, one is you worked on finding your awareness of what your patterns are. And then you put that into practice in real life through how you spoke to your kids. And then you realize how that might contrast from how you speak to yourself, and you corrected that over time. And then you would do the same thing with your wife, which was also like an accountability factor, like both with your kids and your wife. And then you incorporated the journaling. And so it just became this consistent everyday process. And is that like a fair summary of what your steps were?
Yeah, very fair.
Yeah, man, it's awesome, dude. And and thanks for sharing that. But I do want to talk a little about your branding and marketing strategy for Flowhold, because I just think it's so interesting, and it's so important, especially in apparel, because apparel is, as we all know, extremely saturated. And I had someone on my podcast, Ryan Williams. You might know who he is.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So he runs, in a apparel manufacturing business. Yeah. So I had some questions for him around this and his opinions around starting an apparel brand today. And he pretty much said, don't do it.
Yeah.
But it really comes down to your marketing, your story, and the feeling you're giving somebody. If people are going to connect with that, then you can do it. And I'm curious, I just want to start with this, and this will get into the marketing branding strategy and social media strategy. What feeling or story or representation do you want fighters who wear your gear to have and portray?
Yeah, I mean, like kind of mentioned previously, like Flowhold is largely an amalgamation of my influences through my youth and my life. Obviously there's the jiu-jitsu and MMA aspect to it. It's a Jiu-Jitsu and MMA brand, right? So that's covered. And then, there's a lot of influence from kind of skate and surf brands that I really was into as a kid coming up. And then, punk rock and hardcore music, is a strong influence as well. And then kind of, I think about like through that, like what got me into, a lot of the art style and the aesthetics of the brand are like deeply trenched in the hardcore music scene. Yeah. And so like kind of what drew me to that as a kid, and what I think is like kind of represented through the brand as well was like, I think a lot of people discover hardcore by getting into punk rock music first. And, I loved like the chaotic energy of like punk rock music. And, that was really fun to me. And it felt like something I had a lot of, and it was a cool channel to express that through. But then the thing with punk rock music is that like, it's a lot of, it's like anarchy, burn it down, tear the systems apart. But then what? And there's like a nihilistic streak through punk rock music. And I just didn't really like resonate with that all that much. And then I kind of discovered hardcore music that, it's heavier. Yeah. It's a little violent. But there's particularly this like sub-faction that's really like positive and about building stuff up and making our communities better and improving yourself. And these themes were like really present through this music. And I love that because again, like I like that positivity, but not wrapped in like that fluffy, foofy, like not realistic aspect. Life is hard. And everything's not pretty all the time. And it's not easy to hold on to these beliefs and to be positive and to try to have an optimistic outlook. So it's like, it's important to recognize that reality as well. And that's what I felt like was cool about like hardcore music. That was like, it was gritty and it was raw and it was real, but in spite of it all, like we're going to come together, unite, and like build up ourselves stronger and build our communities better. Like that's kind of like the ethos that I was drawn to and resonated with me through hardcore music.
That's interesting because I'm seeing where this relates to with your logos, with your different designs.
Yeah. And that's like I felt like there's so many parallels through that and in mixed martial arts training. I mean, that's like, it's the whole thing. And it's like, if you're uninitiated and you have no idea what it's all about, and, you look at it from the outside, you might see this thing as like, oh, you have all these like barbarians and they're locking themselves in cages and like beating themselves unconscious. And, but like, that's the gritty exterior, but that is the reality of life. Is like, again, it's hard. It's, you gotta be strong. You gotta be tough. And like, you have to be resilient and build yourself into these things. But deeper inside, it's like, it's about this struggle to develop ourselves and to realize our best potential and to intentionally put obstacles in front of ourselves to overcome. And I mean, I think anyone that's spent even a few weeks training jiu-jitsu, like you start to realize that like there's so many parallels between training on the mat and just going about your life. And like those challenges and those things that you start to get better at facing, they translate a lot, so it's like, yeah, from hardcore to the mats to life, like it's all like these similar lessons that I think cross over a lot really well.
So how are you approaching your marketing strategy with the apparel, with this idea that you just described in your designs?
Yeah.
And it's cool. It gets people's attention. Like I mentioned to you earlier, I love your gear.
Thanks, man.
A lot of people do. It's obviously getting amazing traction. You've built a following on social media, on the Flowhold Instagram. What are you doing to stand out that's, I guess, different from just what the designs are?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at the marketing, especially the social media side, like I see a lot of of room for growth and improvement. I mean, you know, it's done decently well, and we've in Instagram and social media in general is like a great way for us to get like the brand out there and everything. But you know, there's a lot on there that I think I can improve upon even. And you know, at this point, this is kind of like a real strong growth point for the brand, of like bringing on people to help. You know, my plate's very full with doing a lot of stuff within the business that is certainly time to be delegated out to others. So that's kind of like where I'm at working on now. You know, I have a lot of ideas for marketing and things I'm going to do within the brand, and kind of we touched on in the beginning about doing like kind of a podcast style thing. And, you know, there's a lot of things that I'm going to be doing, but I just haven't not had the time to do at this point because I'm doing so much myself.
Right.
So as I'm, you know, working on getting some help to hire some people in and delegate some out some of the other stuff, there's a lot that I'm going to be doing. I don't love like kind of talking about the stuff that I'm going to do because I like to, you know, to do it and then discuss it.
I get it.
But up to this point, you know, I think like what I've done, what I've tried to do on social media, you know, in the very beginning, I definitely was like really tried to present as like a professional and an official brand. And like, you know, I didn't want even anyone knowing it was like a one person show that I was like running it and like I'm packing every order and doing all this stuff. But I'm like, you know, whatever. That was like my idea at that time. And then I got to a point where I was like, well, you know, you're trying to like, or like, not that I'm trying to present as something fake, but I'm not trying to show the whole picture per se. And I'm maybe trying to look a little more professional. And then I'm like, the things that bigger professional brands have, like, you know, they have things that come along with being of that scale. You know, they have resources. Like, I don't have any of that stuff. Like, what do I have is just the authenticity of it being like my brand and myself. So like, then I tried to start leaning into that more. And rather than kind of thinking in my head before like posting something or putting stuff out or creating language or content or whatever it may be for the brand, instead of being like, oh, does this present well? Does this seem professional? Is this going to come off as like polished? Like, I just kind of started to do what I wanted to do in a sense. And so like, you know, I do a lot of like these stupid little like memes and stuff like for jiu-jitsu. And I remember like the first one I was going to do, I was like, man, does this like seem unprofessional? Is this not in line with like the brand or whatever? And then again, like I talked about earlier, like I have a lot of influence from like these skate brands when I was a kid. Yeah. And I like thought about like skate brands and what they are. And like the humor element was like a big, like I loved watching the old skate videos and like seeing the little skits and seeing them fuck around in it and like making jokes and like the graphics being silly and putting out like a ridiculous ad campaign that's like clearly a joke. And I was like, no, man, like if this is like this is a part, like my humor and the humor like as being a part of the brand, like that's not, maybe it is unprofessional. I don't know. But again, like who cares? Like I'm just going to do it. And then, you know, people, you know, they're sometimes they're silly, sometimes they're dumb, sometimes they're pretty funny. But you know, those did well for like traction and people sharing and stuff. Cause like you can make the coolest product in the world. It's going to be subjective. Someone's always gonna be like, this is fucking awesome. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. And then that same thing, someone else is gonna be like, I would never, you can pay me to wear that thing. So it's like, there's subjectivity to that, but also like, as you can make the coolest thing in the world, but like not a lot of people are going to share that to their stories, you know? But on social media, you can either, you know, I think that are either things that are like inspiring and empowering, people will share. Things that are really funny, people are going to share. And then things that are probably like controversial people are going to share. And
the way of the internet.
Yeah. You know, and I'm definitely not interested in like stoking controversy. You know, being inspiring and empowering is hard. Yeah. So I, you know, just thought we could make some humor.
Yeah. So there's a lot of personality behind this strategy.
That kind of stuff. And then just like, just kind of, you know, trying to put out stuff that's, that has some sort of value to people and not just like, here's this product, buy this thing, you know?
For sure.
And then like, you know, just finding cool, other cool people to collaborate with and like, cool, you know, cool videographers, cool photographers that can create like an artistic piece featuring the clothing that's not so much like about the clothing, but it's like, oh, that's a dope picture of people training, right. Like my buddy Sonny Dez, he's an active EOD tech, and he's an amazing photographer and videographer. And he's hooked me up with some really cool like photos and videos and stuff for the brand. And he captures that stuff like perfectly. But I'm like, we're wearing Flowhold and stuff in the gear, but I watched his stuff, and even I think unbiasedly, I'm just like, dude, this is a sick video. I know I'm in this video and I'm wearing my gear in this video, but like just the way he shoots and like the things he's capturing, like I'm like, I feel like outside as a consumer, like someone, if I wasn't involved with the brand, like I would just see this and be like, oh, that's cool. So that's the kind of stuff that I want to like hopefully put out. And I don't think that's like groundbreaking. I think a lot of brands are seeing it that way, but yeah,
for sure. I like that, man. I ask a question to everybody towards the end here. And it is, what is an entrepreneurial life hack that goes against the mainstream belief that you would share with the audience?
Let's see, life hack.
It could be tactical or a mindset.
Yeah, man. For me, I think it's looking big picture and long term. I think like the whole entrepreneurial space gets really bogged down and ingrained with like a lot of the like hustle mindset and like the productivity bro, and like there's elements of that are important, and I think it's really good to have like that gear that you can turn on and just like get shit done and make stuff happen, but like that is those are like short-term solutions, and it's like it's not very sustainable, and it's certainly not sustainable for like an actual fulfilling life, So I think like looking at your life holistically and recognizing, there's going to be seasons of the business where you got to buckle down and just like bust your ass, and there's going to be late nights and early mornings and stuff. But like the point of entrepreneurship is to not create like a business that's successful, but to create a life and a lifestyle that's successful. And I mean, I don't know how many stories you hear of people that like get into the entrepreneur saying like maybe 4-hour work week, I'm going to build this, I'm going to build this business that's going to allow me to fulfill my dreams, and I'm going to travel, and then you flash forward to a few years later and the business is doing well, but like they're essentially just like, you're kind of an employee to like a really bad boss with terrible hours. And it's like, imagine just being an employee, but like you're expected to stay up till midnight and you got to work on Saturday, and it's like, that's not the point, you know? So I think like keeping a holistic mindset and recognizing when that like hustle grind type thing is important, and throttling back on that, and applying, that discipline and that hard work into other areas of your life that are gonna, not just make your business better, but will make yourself better, and then in turn will also make your business better, And so, for me, is like with my family, like I'm not gonna like, I don't care how successful or great my business is. If it makes my relationship with my wife and my children worse, then I don't want anything to do with it. I'd rather, I was going to say go back in the military, but that's I don't want to be deployed for 6 months at a time, but like, I'd rather work a normal job and then be done at 4:00 and go home and have the evenings free and spend time with my family than have a really successful business that took me away from them all the time, So my whole thing is trying to build this thing within the context of my life, and my family is very, very much the primary part of that. And then also like the things that I enjoy. Again, I started this because I wanted to train jiu-jitsu and surf and do that stuff. So like, I don't want to lose sight of that. And there's days where maybe I should answer the emails, but like, dude, I run a jiu-jitsu company. I'm going to go train. I'll get to the email tomorrow. Yeah. And then, there's days where maybe I do want to train, but this stuff really does have to get done because other people rely on me. And there's going to be times where it goes back and forth, but like just keeping the big picture in mind. Yeah. So.
Awesome, man. Well, Noah, thanks so much for sharing all this. This is I love to hear about the journey, and I appreciate all the steps, and especially the part when you talk about the kind of the difficult period of years to get to where you are and how thankful you are for that, and then how you implemented that gratitude practice. I think that really is a major theme in your story and something you should be super proud of, and it's inspiring for others. It's inspiring for me. I like to ask, is there anyone who you would recommend from your network that I should have on the show? And I look for people who are elite athletes, ex-military, who have transitioned into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, man, you've got a good catalog. I mean, I'd seen stuff in the past, and then particularly like once we got connected too, like I went through, and you've gotten a lot of good folks on here. Let me think. I mean, dude, my sensei Jocko. I said my sensei Jocko.
Oh yeah, hey, man.
I don't know. Honestly, I don't really have any pull there at all. But that would be cool. But
that's a long-term one.
I know. One day in the future, though, we'll get some more belts. But let me think about it. I'll get some to you.
Sounds
for sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Noah. Well, thank you so much, man.
Yes, sir.
Awesome conversation. I need to get my hands on some Flowhold gear, and let's get on the mats and get into that flow state, man.
I'm looking forward to training together soon.
Yeah.
So we'll make it happen like very, very soon.
Awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, dude.
Hell yeah, bro. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me for this episode of Built for Legacy with Chris Nichols. Please hit the subscribe button on YouTube and follow on Apple and Spotify. And on Instagram, follow at Nichols and Dimes and at Built for Legacy Podcast. And please like or comment on any of the videos you come across. Would love to hear your feedback so I can continue to innovate and grow the podcast. Thank you for the support, and we'll see you next time.